Thanks everyone for joining our webinar, IoT Security, Getting Ahead of the Digital Impact to Your Business, presented by TrustedSec. My name is Chris Besch, and I'm the VP of Sales and Marketing at TrustedSec. Before I introduce the speakers, I'd like to provide a brief background of TrustedSec. TrustedSec is an information security consulting firm at the forefront of attack simulations with focus on strategic risk management to help organizations defend against threats of all kinds and to change the security industry for the better. TrustedSec's expert senior consultants utilize pioneering insights developed by our adversary emulation threat and research team to find and diagnose vulnerabilities, then create a comprehensive roadmap for holistically improving the client's security programs. Our reputation as a relationship-driven organization is a testament to our team's passion and commitment to helping our partners improve their defensive postures. Beyond custom diagnostics and detailed remediation programs for clients, TrustedSec conducts industry research, develops new tools, administers training classes, and keynotes, presents, and hosts security conferences throughout the world. Here's a list of some of the services we offer. As mentioned on the previous slide, I'd point out that our research team impacts all of these services. The group is led by Carlos Perez, also known as Dark Operator on Twitter. Pen testing has gotten significantly harder over the years, given the investment in improving defensive tools and technology. We recently did a webinar about this titled The Evolution of Pen Testing, which was led by Dave Kennedy, our CEO. Our research team helps us find new attack vectors, vulnerabilities, so we're always adding significant value on engagements. This holds true for our pen testing, red teaming, app security, etc. It also impacts the advisory services. We take an integrated risk management approach to our offerings. We've recently did another blog and webinar discussing how bad pen tests can lead to bad risk assessments. Having great tests and integrating them into a risk assessment helps companies understand the true maturity of their security program. And now for the speakers. Stephen Marshowitz is the Director of Risk Services at TrustedSec. He has been in the security and risk industry for over 13 years and in IT for over 20 years. Prior to TrustedSec, Stephen was the Global Risk Practice Manager in the Digital Transformation Group at Cisco. He was also the President and Advisory Practice Lead for a leading information security consulting firm for 9 years and a management consultant at Ernst & Young prior to that. Stephen has been quoted in numerous magazines and has presented at conferences throughout the country, such as ISACA, ISSA, and the InfoSec Summit. Tim Roth is a security engineer with Cisco. He is a CCIE with more than 10 years of experience in network security. In his role at Cisco, Tim works with his customers to develop network and cloud security solutions. He has been instrumental in Cisco security product design and architecture. Prior to Cisco, Tim worked for several Cleveland organizations like Signet Jewelers, AmTrust Financial, and First Merit Bank. In his various roles, Tim was focused on network architecture, security, and compliance. Before I pass it off to Steve and Tim, I wanted to touch on a couple items. First, we recently wrote 2 blogs that complement the webinar. The first blog is titled Preparing for IoT Segmentation, 6 Steps to Get Your Functional Requirements Right. The second blog is How IoT and Digitization Are Driving Renewed Demand for Segmentation. The blogs can be found on our website, and the links are in the chat section of the webinar toolbar. There will also be another blog released next week as a follow-up to the webinar. Second, we will leave time for Q&A after the presentation. Please type any questions you have during or after the presentation in the questions section of the webinar toolbar. We will try to get to all of them today, and if we can't, we will send a follow-up to everyone who attended. You can also feel free to reach out to us directly after the webinar at info@trustedsec.com. Again, that's info@trustedsec.com. Thanks again for joining, and Steve, go ahead and get us started.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate the intros there. Very interesting stuff. We have a lot going on, and just really wanted to start off today with a little example about the power of exponential numbers. A lot of times we just have a difficult time understanding what that means versus how we typically think. Usually as humans, we've evolved in this planet over, the last hundreds and thousands of years. The only things really effective us were, the same things that we saw every day. It was basically a linear learning curve that we had. The life your great grandparents had is the same as you, is the same as your kids, their kids. Really nothing much changed generation to generation. So today, as we all know, we're living in a world that's global and exponential. And even though we know that, we're so ingrained that it's hard to envision what that really means. What does exponential versus linear mean? So just a quick example to demonstrate a little bit about that. So right now we're in a, we have, some of you have probably seen this or heard of this example before, but it's a which would you rather have. So the good news in this example is you've taken a job where you only have to work an hour a day for the next month, so the next 30 days. So you can do it in your spare time, no problem. That's how good you are. So you have a choice. You can either have $1,000 a day, so 30 days, $1,000, or you get to have a penny, but that penny is doubled every day. So which would you rather have? So write that down. Now, after the first day, clearly you have $1,000 the first day, and you have now a penny to show for your troubles in the second example. So at this point, now that you made your choice and which one you want, write down what you believe each column will add up to at the end of the month. So $1,000 a day for 30 days, pretty simple. And what's a penny, but you get doubled every day? So write that down or think of it, put a number in your head. All right. So after 15 days, so let's see how you're doing. After 15 days, you get $15,000 and $1,000 a day, or 327 bucks. Does not seem like it's a very good example. How long is it going to take for us to catch up, if we catch up at all? Well, clearly, after 21 days, we're now up to almost break even if we would have gone $1,000 a day. So it took us 21 days to actually do this. And so anyone want to change the number? So again, get that number in your head. What is it? All right, after 30 days, turns into, if you had a penny that was doubled every day, you'd have over $5 million. And what's interesting about this example is even for those of us who have seen it before, it's not that you don't get the game, but it's the amount that we think it will be and what it actually is. Even for me, I've seen this numerous times and I constantly get the number wrong. And so not just a little wrong, we're orders of magnitude wrong. So again, we just don't think clearly when we come to exponential growth. So again, the world's moving at this exponential pace, but where are we today? We'll get into a little bit with Internet of Things. So setting the stage a little bit, why is this happening? Well, as we all know, we have a lot of technologies coming after us. Digital is really not gained a ton of notoriety within the security industry, but it certainly has within the business side. We're definitely seeing a really exponential growth very quickly, though, and it's a very quick slope of that curve, strong slope of that curve. But we're not really seeing it in security just yet. But setting the stage, so what is digital transformation and why is it driving the business to change? Well, the first aspect of what this term digital means is in and around big data, artificial intelligence, analytics, which is going to help us lead to more informed decisions. We want to make better decisions. Second is information from everywhere, data from all over the place, sent near real time. Again, those things that are collecting and passing information make us hyper aware. Third is fast execution, getting that information and knowledge back to the points of action, which is critical, back to the points of action and interaction, so that actual things can get done, results can happen. And then lastly is knowing what's acceptable and unacceptable, making sure we accept the good risks and not the bad ones, which is a little bit different, as we discussed during the risk webinar, a little plug, than high risks and low risks. What are the good things that we're willing to gamble with, and what are the things that are just bad gambles? So this is really what, if anybody asks what's digital transformation, you want to know these are the four sort of pillars of it. When we come to IoT, and it's really want to differentiate a little bit, although even with this is already converging. But the first point of this is really the internet. What is the internet and the network part of this? That's been around for a while. What is the transport layer that's moving things back and forth? Pretty simple. The things are really now a lot of what we're talking about today. The core systems and infrastructure, the old things that are already running. It's been around for a long time. Tim mentioned earlier. And those things are now being connected. And then the last thing is the thingy, as it's sometimes called, but securing the device. So that actual device was built particularly for the Internet of Things, and particularly to be able to be connected and manipulated and really provide a lot of business benefit. But even in this space, we've had some, just recent examples that Tim was sharing. So I'll let you share a little bit.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, it's pretty funny. I was actually sharing with Stephen. I like to think about IoT almost in the simplest terms, even at home. And you think about all of the IoT devices that you may have on your network at home. And so we have, I know in my house, we've got cameras for our kids and my baby, and we have, the Ring doorbell or the doorbell, and we have the Nest, and you'll see all these different IoT devices. And it's interesting, we don't necessarily think about the security that surrounds those. And I was just looking at some of the security tools that I have, and there was some malware that was dropped on my doorbell. And I saw that had been compromised and taken over. And, we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but just some of the best practices surrounding that. And at home, I make sure that, my devices that need to connect to cloud services are segmented, and then I make sure my IP cameras can't get out to the internet. But we just continue to keep seeing more and more things connected to the network. And especially on the business side, we're seeing, I see my customers, a lot of times they just continue to add devices to the network, and IT isn't even aware that that's happening. To your point, maybe it's sensors, maybe it's medical devices, the whole nine.
So with that, the digitization at the core there, currently we're slowly operationalizing our network into production. But a lot of us think that operations technology or OT or IoT just affects manufacturing, but clearly we're seeing it all over. Probably the two biggest are healthcare and manufacturing, but it's happening everywhere in every industry. Retail, we're seeing omni-channel, so multiple channels, integration, so that we can provide a better customer journey for our customers when they come into our store, online, or whatever it might be. Shopping carts, etc. Connections multiplying exponentially with their data. From manufacturing side, no question, the shop floor is being connected. Third parties are managing our now devices. You're not buying a drill anymore. You're buying time from someone else. You're buying, renting someone else's drill and putting time on that, and they're monitoring it and making sure that they're responsible for the upkeep and the maintenance. Healthcare, which we'll touch on even more so, but because of the obviously the consequences, but connecting medical devices, energy, critical infrastructure, and really every industry along the supply chain. And as those supply chains are lengthening and we're having more of them, what we can't let is have security become that choke point, because there's so much innovation and so much happening. Again, we don't see it quite yet in the security space, but rest assured, in the business, it's absolutely coming. So what are some of the differences just from an operational security standpoint? It's different because really there's four major changes. Number one is scale, and that's the exponentialness that we talked about. But still, many of the operational aspects remain the same. We're not at scale yet, clearly, but we're not at diversity, but we are seeing a lot of function and flow where people are handling that today. So these modern control systems aren't isolated anymore, but they're really part of a larger connected infrastructure that shows things are fit for purpose. They're embedded into devices. There's obviously a speed, that velocity back and forth. And so the security risks associated with integrating, modifying, or maintaining those controllers, if you will, can certainly impact overall safety and security. But safety is a big thing in the operation technology space.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We were talking about this earlier, Steve. I was reading a report from SANS, and it was just talking about, what IT cares about and what OT cares about. A lot of times you see that OT really, one of the top priorities is keeping the business online.
Yep.
And it's keeping, and especially in manufacturing, it's keeping their employees safe, right? And then you look at the IT side, and we want to make sure that we keep our assets secure. We want to make sure we keep our data secure. And it's kind of bringing those two worlds together. And, I've seen some of my customers really start working through that process as OT, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in healthcare. So they bring these assets online, that they're working together to make sure that these assets, they check them, they're talking to the security teams that own those assets, right? And making sure that these tools are vetted before they actually bring them into their environment.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the diversity of them is starting to really pick up, and we are seeing initial investigation. But what's really the difference, or what are some of the difference between an IT network and an IoT or OT operations technology network, differences in priorities? Well, start off with the focus. I mean, obviously, most of us here probably on the call, most interested in security, are aware that we're protecting intellectual property and some sort of company asset. From an OT or IoT standpoint, they're looking at making sure that we have 24/7 operations. That breathing machine can't go down. That they have high overall equipment effectiveness, OEE, and then, as you said, safety.
Right.
Safety is such a big key in the OT space. They will sacrifice a virus or whatever to make sure that safety is paramount, as it should be. We see an actual reversing of the traditional CIA priorities, and confidentially, which we care about, integrity and availability. They really care about availability. What's the uptime? That's how they're going to get bonus. That's how they look at things, making sure that it's available. How, especially if you're in charge of a plant, understanding that these guys, they have to keep that plant running. Everything that the business counts on them for operationally is that plant, and your plant that you're the plant manager of, continues to run. So they care about availability. So what that means is they're going to, obviously, we know that they've had their own network. Their converged network used to be siloed,
right.
Not connected, which
Right.
is always was nicer. Again, the obscurity was, security by obscurity. If you can keep it offline and not connect it and not have a part of any other system, you're clearly going to be more secure. Those are the, and the data is a little bit different. The protocols and some of the things that they have to go through in the SCADA network. They have very strict physical access. Sometimes in IT, we don't even barely have physical barriers, even a locked door sometimes, because of what we have, the risk that we've deemed. We don't even have that. The implications of a failure are much different as well. So your computer goes down, we have a pretty good sense of a backup, or your data center, that's backed up, or whether it's in the cloud. So we're going to continue to operate if we have a downtime, most likely. Very, very low incidences of not being able to operate. But on the OT side, it could stop, you stop a process, it can impact markets, and it could have a physical harm if a safety device, for example, isn't working. And then on the threats, we're gonna stop things. We're gonna we're gonna get a new website or whatever we need to do. We're gonna make sure that no one can access once we've detected a threat and we're able to remediate. Whereas an OT network, manufacturing, again, a breathing machine, whatever it might be, those things got to keep operating.
Yeah.
And then lastly, and then let Tim comment, really the upgrades and patch management, I think we know it has to be scheduled during downtime. So if we find an incident or something happened, too bad, we're running anyway, versus we're going to stop and make sure that our uptime, it's going to continue going even while everything is maintained. So anything else you wanted to?
Yeah, I think, as I think about the IT side, the security side, I think it's really important that we evaluate our process and our procedure in securing these assets, but then we make sure that those don't slow down the business. Because I think about the business is going to be like, hey, Steve, dude, quit slowing me down.
Yep.
Because if you slow the business down with your security controls and your process, they're just going to bypass you.
Exactly.
I'm just going to put my stuff in. I don't need to worry about Steve. Let's
Right.
go. So I think you got to find that sweet spot there.
And when we talk about some of these policies and things like that, it's all about culture, to your point, and organizational convergence, making those things come together. And I'll talk about it in a second, but it's a different culture in the shop floor or on the a nurse or what have you. They have a whole different culture than we have in IT, and that's probably when we hear from CISOs, that's one of their biggest challenges is bridging that cultural gap.
Yeah.
Even though we all like to talk about technology the most, it's the most interesting, it gets the most hits and all that. But really what CISOs stress about is talking to the executives, talking to the business, and then bridging those cultural gaps to make sure that things get done. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So where are we today in IoT and security? Well, we are now, as I said earlier, if you look at the black line is where the business is. The red line is probably where we are in security. We still don't see, and we don't think that we're that far off. And that's definitely epitomized by what we're seeing from actual interest in assessments. We get a tremendous amount of interest, but as far as what people are actually looking to do currently, it's just at the cusp of taking off. Which is one of the reasons why we had this webinar now. But it's following that hype cycle where we got a lot of hype, goes in that sort of trough, and now things start pick up little by little as we move along. So you can still plug the holes with your fingers today, but eventually, as these devices and things pick up, we're not going to be able to do that. So again, we are still thinking linearly, and the rest of the business is thinking exponentially. And while it looks similar, eventually it's going to completely be changed. So with that, there we go. We do see the issue. So little research from CSO Magazine and Kaspersky study, but 77, 4 out of 5 industrial organizations believe their networks are going to suffer an attack, but only about half of them have a way to detect anything. So we know that it's happening, but we still like to gamble. And our fears are really conventional malware, ransomware, data leaks and spying, but targeted attacks. That has really been picking up in the fears, and maybe it's through the media or what have you. But we even have, a couple of examples that has just happened recently with it. And then lastly, what actually caused the security incident? So there still is this divergence of what we fear and what is actually happening. So, as always, no one does much unless they have to. But what we're really seeing is, a good majority of them at least had one malware or virus attack. Almost 2/3. A little more than a quarter have either had a ransomware or were breached due to errors and omissions. And then one of the interesting things is a large percentage, which is not always easily reported, but when we go and do incidents, we find out that it was a squirrel or some other kind of animal that caused the problem. So even though we have fears, maybe we're only doing a few things about it, and we're still hampered by some employees and then sort of natural causes. So what are the gaps that we see, and then we'll get into a little bit of what we think you should do about it. So some of the gaps we see are, again, clearly separate IT and OD departments. I don't know if when you go and talk to customers, are they converging? You're probably still mostly talking to the IT folks. Are you getting much into the OT?
Yeah, you're really seeing, especially like when we come in and talk to our customers, we're spending a lot of time talking to IT, and you see that IT stays in a silo.
Still.
And some of the more mature organizations are really trying to be part of that OT effort.
Yep.
Meeting with the OT manufacturers, meeting with the OT business units, but it's still pretty siloed, absolutely.
Yep. And because of that, there's not a overall governance. Who's in charge? So
Right.
If the plant manager says, I ain't doing it, who says, yes, you are? Or who makes the decision? Well, based on the risks that we have to do it. Those are still not clearly defined. It's still pretty, again, in those silos. And the policies then, therefore, aren't really fulfilling the integrated decisions. They're only addressing one need or the other. We definitely don't understand our risk levels. What do we care about? How are we making decisions on what we're doing? We don't know that. We don't have visibility absolutely into our OT assets. We still see very flat networks. Some still don't even have firewalls yet, if you can believe that, in front of their manufacturing spaces. I think in some of the other areas, healthcare, et cetera, we have that. But in manufacturing, we're still seeing, some of those plants, they don't even have a firewall yet. We don't have a great sense of threat intelligence for OT. And as a result, you're going to be suffering an incident, as we just saw in those stats. But overall, we're not prepared for an IoT incident. The scale, the way to fix it, what we're going to do, we're just not prepared for it. So as those numbers pick up, we're going to see some big changes, I think, coming.
Yeah, and Steve, to add on there, I mean, that's one thing that I'm really passionate about is visibility and understanding what assets are out there and getting that inventory. And that's something that Cisco and we work with our customers on, just really trying to understand and scrub what is out there, and then understanding, once we classify and understand the assets, what is the purpose of that asset and what is it communicating to? And then that can kind of help you work backwards a little bit and go back to the business unit and be like, hey, do you really need these assets, and provide the data around it?
Yep.
And then as you're looking at the IT and the OT aspects here, a lot of time these, just thinking out loud, the business doesn't necessarily see an IoT device, in my opinion, as a little mini computer. They see it as a device, right? They see it as a, just like their phone on their desk, or they see it just as like a tool that they use. They don't necessarily see it as a computer like IT would see it.
Yep.
So I think, just thinking out loud, it's really important for IT to educate the business unit on what is an IoT device. How do we, understand the elements around that, and then how do we interact with it? Risks that are tied to it, right?
Yep. What are the risks tied to it? And with that, we'll get into the 8 to-dos based on those gaps, and we'll touch on that pretty significantly, and which perfect lead into assessing the risks. So when we talk about risk, everything boils down to risk and reward. What are you willing to risk to get what reward? In a obviously a hospital, we are not willing to risk a patient's life. That's just the most critical thing that we care about. So it doesn't matter what the reward is. It doesn't matter, how much more efficient. If we have a patient's life at stake, we're not going to be able to risk that. But on some of the other ones, and so that, like that, because it's such an extreme example, but some other things of, hey, what about this, particular subsystem? Do we need to have that up? Are we able to risk a vulnerability that's come in somewhere that if we shut that down to not impact the business, are we willing to do that? Or are we not willing to do that? So the 3 critical things that we're always looking to do, and we start with risk assessments, is make sure that you're risk aligned. What is it? So risk aligned means, what's your strategy? How are you going to address what you're going to do? And strategy equals choice. That's really what it means at the house. What is your choice? So before we can move on to anything else, we have to know what choices are we making and why. And so in order for you as an IT professional, even OT, to be in a defensible position, you have to know that. And it can't come from either IT or OT. It has to come from the business. That's critical, and that's the first place to start. because a lot of times you're going to determine not just what you're going to do with security, but what you're not going to do and why, and not just by default. So we start there. We want to make sure that our assessments, that we're operationally efficient, of course, that we're doing things well, and that obviously where it comes to pass, that we're fully compliant. But risk assessments can relieve a lot of those choke points, so that we can say, all right, the business has to come first. We need to know where things are going. We know what gambles that we're going to take. And then we can pull back and say, okay, here's where the choke point is. What do we want to do? Do we want to, and some of these charts show, here's what it's going to be. Here's where we are now. And after we spend this amount of money, here's our next level. Here's the amount of risk that we're willing to take. So those things, and getting the business involved. So many times in IT and security especially, we take things on our own.
Yeah.
See that? And our, we'll say, all right, well, we don't have budget. Well, the business didn't give us budget. In a lot of cases, that's our own fault, because we haven't put it back at them. We haven't put it back at the business. So we have to tell the CFO, no problem. I don't mind doing nothing. That's right. Good by me, as long as you're the one that's accepting the risk for this. And again, we spoke a lot of bit about this on our risk assessment webinar, so you definitely check that out. But this just becomes paramount to everything, and it's a challenge for all of us, because it's not something that we're used to. We typically grew up in IT world. If the business wanted something, we were there to support it. We have to move past the office of no, which I think we're doing a lot better just as an industry, security industry, that we are enabling the business, but I don't think yet we're putting the risk and the reward decision, that choice, into the hands of the people that really need to make it. So if they give you, here, we need this much money and this is what it's going to do, if we can, and they say no problem, they're the ones that accepting it. So
hard data to get stuff done.
It is. It's pretty critical, and I spent a little time on it. But a lot of times, again, we want that technology. We like the way the technology works. But every CISO we talk to, every study that comes out, it's all interpersonal relationships, understanding risk, relaying that to the right people, making sure your CFO knows, or whomever is in charge, and they have a changing role now as well. They're not just able to deal with budgets, but they're more forefront in front of organizations and why you're doing things, especially with security getting so much traction lately. So a lot here, and it's really, really critical for not only what you're going to do, for the company, but also for you personally. Okay, enough about that. It's a big deal. Inventory. So number 2 is inventorying your assets and flowing the data. And this is what Tim was talking about. According to Ponemon, we love those. For 2018, only 9% of respondents say they're fully aware of all the physical objects connected to the internet. Only 9%. Only 15% say they have an inventory of most of their IoT applications, not just the devices, but just the applications. And 85% cite the lack of centralized control as a reason why it's so difficult to maintain a full inventory of IoT applications. So where we need to know, what do we have and where is that data flowing? So as I put up there, you need to know what you don't know. And that's critical. And we don't even know what we don't know yet. It's really just getting a solid understanding of what we have and where it's coming and going. So I know you talked about that, the visibility a little bit before, but this is where it really becomes critical.
Absolutely, yeah, and this is something when I'm working with my customers on IoT, this is like one of the starting points. Obviously, we talk about risk, and there's getting the risk assessment, but from a very tactical standpoint, we want to understand what's out there.
Yep.
What's connected to the network. Get that data, and I think what's neat about Cisco is we can actually use the network to inventory what assets are out there, scrubbing the ID with the network, and then once I get that data, to your point, then I can start putting them into logical groupings. Then I can make a decision on how do I actually interact with these devices moving forward. What policy do I put in place?
Yep, makes sense. Next is again, establish that governance and policy. And this really is more about integrating with people. So if you look at the operations folks, think about it from their perspective. They've been in their job 100 years. They really know what they're doing. They've been in total control of their environment. So it doesn't, again, generate a ton of buzz, these types of things. But when you hear from CIOs, again, this is what they're struggling with. When it comes to the shop floor, the people are critical. Obviously, the nurses and doctors, et cetera, as well. But most of the people, been on the shop floor in a hospital or run the supply chain, as an example, they're adept at maintaining and improving processes. So that's we see that quite a bit. But also, they care more about simplicity and control. So simplicity, they don't want to look stupid. That's pretty much it. If you make something too complex for them, when we have a policy that they don't understand or a procedure that they're not, they're just not going to follow, when they're rebelling because they don't want to feel. It's just human nature. We all want to, look smart and feel like we know we're doing our job and feel good about it. And we want to be in control. We don't want to listen to some IT guy now coming in and telling me what I need to be doing. Again, this is the risk assessments help a tremendous amount with this to move up, but that governance, who's in charge, who's making decisions. And then again, lastly, they care about the facility or operation shutdown. You have any kind of endangerment to that from a safety perspective, my bonus perspective, or what's going to impact the company perspective, they're not going to do it. So when we're establishing that governance and who's in charge and who's really going to make the decisions, and the policies and procedures, the people have to come into. We have to include them in what we do. So that's, again, another people type thing, policy and procedure, but so critical in the beginning of it. So this one I like a lot because, we don't always have a chance to do things the right way and take the time that we need. So the thing that I always talk about, I'll let Tim expand on this, but you want to go for the quick fit. Like, is there anything I can do quickly? Like, isn't there something I can just jam in there and have it work? And is there some sort of, maybe it doesn't fix everything that we have, but there's got to be something that I can do quickly around this. And I have another one at the end, but this one is pretty important, and we're seeing a huge uptick in it, is make sure your things are not calling back to known or emergent malicious sites through their DNS requests. And I know we just had an incident this weekend.
Yeah, so there was a recent incident with DNS Rebinding, where essentially you see like assets in your home network. You can see access points or IoT type devices in your network being used to call out to devices in your environment to pull out malicious data.
Yep.
And you look at things like using DNS as protection in front of your environment. And so Cisco has a platform called Umbrella that we acquired from OpenDNS, and it's simply just changing your external DNS query. Yep. And so if you go to do a name lookup and you do a name lookup for a certain domain name, you see that 90 to 91% of malware is DNS based. Mm-hmm. So to your point, that's a pretty quick fix.
Pretty quick fix for 90%.
So you reach out to me, you say, hey, give me the IP address for this domain name. I see 200 billion DNS queries every day. I can tell you pretty quick, is that a known bad domain?
Yep.
Or is it good? If it's good, I can provide you the IP and you move on. If it's bad, I'm not going to.
Yep.
And that's a very quick fix. And going back to the statistic that you just gave, 9% of organizations knowing that they have IoT devices out there, that's pretty scary.
Yep.
So to your point, we need to put in quick and easy wins so that we can block bad things from happening anywhere possible.
Agreed. Yeah, Gartner says 30% will specifically target branch offices as well. So much of this here, and again, if you can get something, now 90%, I have 80% on there, so outdated, but a lot going on in this space. Get it out, and the incident over the weekend was 500 million devices.
Yeah.
And again, Cisco was one of the devices that is also found vulnerable that have been out there. So we have to know what we're able to do and just get something in there quickly. It's a great first step to patch quite a bit of the risk that we're going to face. Next, we definitely want to prepare for an event. if we are not, really addressing security to the degree that we should, we don't have a risk assessment, we don't have these products in place, we might even have a firewall, we better prepare for an incident. So a couple of stories on this, resiliency. It's all about our ability to bounce back. It's like our white blood cells in the body. We can't protect against everything, so we are getting attacked all the time, so we're prepared. Our body knows, all right, we have a cold virus, we better, extra produce white blood cells, go and attack it, get it out of our system. So a couple of stories with this, as we've seen, and just, with two different industries. First one was on a medical device. So what we saw was a medical device was running a version of Windows XP hit by a 10-year-old worm because it wasn't able to be patched by the vendor. So again, someone says, well, patch management is critical. Well, we can't always patch these things.
So especially if we don't know about it.
Yeah, exactly. We don't even know about it. So we just can't, have a patch management policy. Very, very different than what we see in the IT space. But we couldn't take the device offline. It was shut down the entire radiology department of a hospital. So incident response, we got involved working with the vendor to manually remove the malware and then wait for them to patch. So we have to be prepared for those things, and that's within a hospital. Another one was a controller for an IoT device in a manufacturing plant. I'm pretty sure I'm getting most of the details right on this one from our incident response department, but also consider this, while it's manufacturing, also a supply chain compromise. It was a controller for an IoT device that was running Windows 10. The vendor used a third-party remote management program to perform remote administration tasks. Again, such a great business benefit that we can do these things remotely now. We can take over this machine. We can really provide a lot of performance improvements, but that program then would connect back to a server the vendor owned, of course, over the internet. So remote access ports at vendor's end, not firewalled, clients open to the internet. The server at the vendor site was compromised and used to launch a PowerShell on all IoT device controllers to download and install crypto mining malware. So we had to go involved and physically segment off that device, which we'll talk about in a second, which couldn't be turned off until the vendor could verify that they actually fixed the issue and remediated systems. So these are just a couple examples of things that we have to be prepared for. And typically we don't have a good incident response plan. We haven't done tabletops. We haven't tested it. And so that's clearly, if we're not gonna, if we're behind in security, we better be prepared for that event. Next is we want to push some of those tasks to our third parties. According to the Gartner's First Market Guide, third-party hardware maintenance, there's more than 10 million devices under third-party maintenance now. 10 million, 71% of those very large organizations leverage that third-party management support. So one of the ways that they're doing this is they are doing it contractually. 53% or so, half of the people are moving that to a contractual arrangement. So we're in it together for sure, and we have our own responsibilities within our own company, but we have to make sure our vendors are taking care of their devices, that they're taking this as seriously as we are, and even on their old devices, what do they plan to do with the old devices? But a lot of them, as you might expect, they're not getting any money anymore for those devices. So wherever we can, and again, risk assessment comes in. Is it worth having that device, or is it worth getting a new one that is up to the standards? So there's quite a bit of due diligence and process that actively evaluates the risk of third parties. Next is segmentation. We've had some debate on this one within the IT networks internally because of the challenges and the complexity for segmenting. But segmentation is pretty simple. Take all of your most important assets, get it into a location, and secure the heck out of that. Well, what of course we're finding now is that doesn't work anymore. We can't just segment off an entire wing of the hospital or a specific plant. Those plants now are connected to other systems. So segmentation becomes very critical, but it's not the same that it used to be. But again, very simply, who's talking to who should be talking to whom, and who shouldn't be. So that's the core. If you can set it up, as the U.S. CERT says, it's going to really significantly remove that risk. We can, by segmenting some of the stats that we have, we've seen incident identification goes down from 100 hours to 10 hours or so, 12, 8, in that ballpark. Reduction in the ability to fully compromise a system from 90% of the time to 15% of the time. So there are order of magnitude differences in these in segmenting your network, and particularly in IoT. But it must be software based, and I think that's where we're seeing a big difference in what's happening within the organization.
And Steve, it's interesting call out there. 2014, Cisco Talos, our security research team, found a thermostat that had hard-coded passwords in it, was vulnerable, and that thermostat could be used for recon in the environment, or it could be used to take over, a host inside of your environment. We worked with that manufacturer to help them patch it. But I think it's a good story because that thermostat shouldn't live in the same network that your customer database lives on,
Right.
that your PCI information lives on, that your HIPAA data lives on. It should be in its own isolated segment. But to your point earlier, it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Because maybe it's changing an IP address, or maybe it's meeting with the business unit to be like, hey, I got to put it in a different network. And then they're like, you're difficult, you're complex, go away.
Yeah. And PCI, for PCI, we've been segmenting for 15 years now.
Right.
But it's a different game.
Exactly. So what we've seen is customers adopting some of the technologies that Cisco provides now, that it's software defined, where one, we help identify what assets are out there.
Yep.
And then very basic, we just build out groupings, right? We build out a group for, say, your PCI devices, say maybe your IoT devices, or in the terms of, hey, here's your cameras. And then we build out a policy that's software defined, that's pushed out to the network fabric to enforce that policy, or pushed out to the firewall to enforce that policy. So you go to maybe one place to build, develop, and enforce that policy, and then it's dynamically pushed. That makes things a lot easier, and it helps us to actually meet these needs of segmentation.
Yep.
And if we're not segmenting our assets, we're increasing our risk, right?
No question. Now, again, in the IT space, you might say, well, is the value really there anymore? Is it worth it? You get into the OT space, the medical devices, manufacturing plants. Again, you have to have a plane, so you have multiple locations. You can't do that in the same way that you used to do. So, yeah, it's a big thing in a big shift in the industry. Now, even softwares have been around for a while, but it's never really been this easy to use the software. But with that, I will say you still have to think through what is going where and who's doing what.
And I think it's a crawl, walk, run strategy.
Yeah.
I think it's starting off with identifying your assets and understanding what's out there. And then I'm even seeing kind of in that walk, I'm seeing customers put in like behavioral tools. So they're understanding what's going on, baselining their environment. And then when they see something deviate from the norm, they can point out and be like, hey, what is this? Why did I see this spike in traffic? Or why am I seeing my host talk to this known C2 host?
Mm-hmm.
And then that also gives them data to then get into segmentation.
Yep.
Because segmentation, let's call it what it is. It may not be the easiest thing to put in, even with software defined. So what things am I doing before I get to the segmentation effort?
Yep, exactly. So good. So a lot going on in that space. And then lastly, we talk about deception technology. And what we want to do is deceive hackers. So again, we have these constraints with IoT devices. We can't put things on it. You can't have anything on the device. And so there's a great new technology out that, again, if you can jump the curve a little bit, let's definitely take some of those steps, which is you put out decoys, honeypots, things like that. But those decoys will then appear as a production asset. So typically it's going to have some prevention techniques. But really that, again, visibility to catch the inside the network threats, those ones that are already in there, they want to engage, they want that decoy to, again, we will know then if they're going after that decoy, we clearly know something's up. and we got to make sure that they're not taking advantage of it. So, it can also, the technology now can also block and quarantine attacks and really improve incident response. So one of our sister company, Binary Defense, has a product that also does this as well. So definitely encourage deception in your IoT network platforms and devices. Okay, so those are the 8 steps. Just to note, we all know that everything's going to merge, that these things are coming together, that we are going to see our OT folks become IT folks and IT folks become more OT folks. But we want to make sure that there's a couple of things that we're doing to keep ahead of it. And with that, a couple of lessons learned. We do know that change only happens if there's no other choice. So we can bug and complain and cry and hope. And even today, showing you, hey, we think linearly and it's exponentially. But generally, the more that you're going to be able to get ahead of it, the better off you're going to be. I don't know if you've seen anything along those lines. We're still a little slow in security picking this up. Again, there's different customers are at different levels of the hype curve, but we really haven't seen a tremendous change. It's been little by little. Manufacturing has been probably the biggest, healthcare, and the other ones are just starting to trickle in. So the sooner you can have a plan, the better off and the better chance you'll have at getting ahead of this. We have to make sure that the business comes first. And again, the people become critical. We have to have those efforts that identify and align with their outcomes, both, again, personal and business, and our outcomes, personal and business. Those outcomes must be frictionless. They cannot impact the business. The business has to come first. However, we do have options for that now. We have many more options than we did 5 years ago or 10 years ago, certainly even just 3 years ago. So we have that ability. We can make it happen, but that does cost money. And so back to the risk assessment, we've got to make sure that that we're understanding, hey, if you want frictionless, if you don't want it to impact anything, we can do it, and here's how much it'll cost. And I think those are the types of, and if you don't, then fine, we're going to accept this risk. And lastly, everything still needs relentless communication. Again, in IT and OT folks, we generally don't talk. We're more like doers. We're going to get the job done. We're behind a computer. They're behind a machine, whatever it would be. So it is creating these groups, and no one likes meetings, but this relentless communication, making sure that everyone's aware of what's happening. And for us in IT, that's critical, and particularly for CISOs. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's really important to build the relationships inside your company. And to your point earlier, it's not just being a siloed IT or IT security segment. It's actually going out and connecting with the business. And when I was on the customer side, I worked when I was at Signet. We actually went out to the manager meeting every year. We met with all the store managers and all the store business units.
Yep.
We learned their business, and then that gave us the ability to educate them on the security side, on the network side. And then there was a lot of good information transfer there. Just by starting that relationship up front, really broke down some walls and allowed us to learn a lot from them. And then they could learn from us. And I can see this really tying into IoT, right?
Yep, right on. All right, looks like we have a few minutes for questions. If anyone wants to share anything.
All right, hey, thanks so much, Steve and Tim. That was a great presentation. A couple of questions looks like you guys already touched on during your presentation. So here's one that I don't believe you did. You said old school and new school controls. Which ones are which?
Yeah, so old school are, previous controls, things like, again, segmentation would be, well, that's really old school, but there's a new things, asset inventory and data flow. Again, that's old. Way back in the day, we used to have segmentation pretty much at the core. We would know what asset inventory, that's how we were doing our protections as things got crazy. It didn't really work. But yeah, some of the new things as we talked about was the DNS, now umbrella, open DNS umbrella type of thing, making sure they don't go to sites. Deception is new. But some of this, it still straggles. Preparing for an event. Again, we saw that big way back in the beginning as we just kind of assumed that was going to happen, took a big hiatus, and now, it's back with a vengeance that we have to be prepared for an incident. So some of the stuff is brand new, but some of it is what's old is new again.
All right, great, thanks. Regarding segmentation, what levels of segmentation? Is it just on the network side?
No, so that's actually a really good question. So within segmentation, we have a couple of blogs and we talk about it. There's some different levels of it. So there's clearly network segmentation where we talk about the IPs, servers, workstations, devices, that type of thing, where we have subnets and VLANs, and we're looking at traditional firewalls, ACLs, and now even microsegmentation. But we're also getting into, and I know you're doing a lot with this, Tim, identity segmentation. So digital identities, user accounts, directories, domains, things like that, and role-based access.
Right.
So, different authentication. What are you guys seeing in it? What are you guys seeing in that?
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to if I have credentials for maybe it's vendor, it's a vendor application that's connecting with my IoT devices. Those set of credentials only have access to those IoT resources in my environment, right? Yep. Locking those down. I think that's a really great point, that it goes just beyond, building out segmentation from a networking perspective. It comes down to identity, role-based access control, and then even getting into the data center. And when we start looking at, servers where we have multiple applications loaded on a server now, how do we isolate our data inside those servers? I think that's an interesting conversation as well.
Yeah, a lot happening there. I mean, there's some even more in depth that's a little bit with memory and processing segmentation either that you can do now. I don't know if you guys if you've been, is Cisco involved in that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got some stuff in that space when it comes down to our data center story, down to the software defined strategy. It comes from the network, even down into the host.
Gotcha. So we can do it over multiple different areas. All right. Well, it looks like we're up against it. Unless anyone else has any further questions, anything else that you have?
Yeah, I think that's it, Steve. And as you said, I think we're up against it on the time perspective. So as I said earlier, if anybody has any questions that we didn't answer, please just email us at info@trustedsec.com. Again, that's info@trustedsec.com, and we can get those answered for you. So again, look for another blog coming out as a follow-up to this, and the recording will be out as well. So thank you so much for everybody for joining, and have a great day.
Thanks so much.
Bye.